Please leave a comment where you are watching from. Let me set the scene. I'm a stressed out, overworked college student in need of some kind of social distraction when Tinder first came onto the scene. Back then, it wasn't the meme-laden wasteland it's sometimes known for now. It felt shiny, new, and promising. You'd swipe, match, and maybe, just maybe, you'd hit the jackpot and meet someone who didn't start every sentence with WID. That's exactly what happened when I matched with her. Let's call her Bae. She was a paramedic, and her bio was like a magnet for my attention. Sharp, funny, and so real it practically screamed this is not a drill. For once, I wasn't nervous about opening the conversation. She seemed cool, and I threw out something playful. To my surprise, she responded right away. From there, the messages flew back and forth. I was quick-witted and hilarious, the kind of person who could turn any mundane story into a full-blown comedy special. We bonded over everything, the absurdity of our schedules, her paramedic shifts, my school and work chaos, the misery of waking up before the sun, and our shared appreciation for memes so bad they looped back around to being genius. Over the days we chatted, I found myself actually looking forward to hearing that little notification ding on my phone. This felt different. She had a thing, though. Playfully, but also a little too often, she'd ask, "You're not sketchy, are you? You don't have a rap sheet or some weird secret life?" It was clearly a joke, but there was a thread of truth in it. She admitted she had a bit of a type, and unfortunately for her, that type often included guys with bad habits and worse judgment. I laughed it off and reassured her that no, I was not a closet criminal, just a caffeine-fueled student trying to make it through the week without imploding. We'd been chatting for almost a week when we set a date to finally meet up. It wasn't going to be anything wild, just a chill coffee hang after one of her shifts. I was psyched. There was just one more weekend shift to get through, and then I'd meet the girl who had somehow made Tinder feel like something more than a swipe factory. 2 nights before the big meetup, though, fate decided to mess with me in the worst way imaginable. I was walking to a buddy's house for a low-key beer and hangout night when 2 guys jumped me out of nowhere. I didn't even see them coming. 1 second I was texting my friend to say I was almost there. The next, I was being shoved against a wall, fists grabbing at my jacket and neck. The gold chain I wore, the only bit of jewelry I owned, and one I probably should have left at home, caught their attention immediately. I wasn't about to hand it over without a fight. Bad decision? Absolutely. They didn't just want the chain, they wanted my rings too. I lashed out, struggling against them, adrenaline doing its best to keep me upright. Somewhere in the chaos, one of them pulled a knife. I didn't feel the stab at first. I just felt the force of the blow to the back of my head, like someone had hit me with a metal pipe. It wasn't until I stumbled back and touched my neck that I felt the blood. A lot of blood. Oh, and as if the situation couldn't get any worse, the small bag of weed in my jacket pocket spilled out during the scuffle. I hadn't even remembered it was there. So there I was, sitting on the sidewalk, bleeding out of a gash in my skull, surrounded by my own spilled stash and the lingering echo of my attacker's retreating footsteps. I was still sitting there in a haze of shock, blood dripping down my neck and pooling around me, when I heard the sirens. Somebody had called for an ambulance, which, great, because I wasn't in the mood to bleed out on the street that night. My vision was blurry, and my head throbbed like I'd been hit with a sledgehammer. All I wanted was to get patched up, go home, and bury myself under a mountain of blankets. The ambulance pulled up, and the doors swung open. That's when I saw her. It was out of all the ambulances in a city of 3 million people, of course it had to be hers. I blinked, trying to process what was happening, but there was no mistaking her. She froze for a split second, staring at me like she couldn't believe it either. Then, like a pro, she snapped into paramedic mode and got to work. "Hey," she said, her voice sharp but professional. "You're bleeding pretty bad. Let's get you on the stretcher." All I could think was, oh my God, I'm bleeding out, and this is the most embarrassing moment of my life. I mean, what were the odds? What kind of sick cosmic joke was this? The girl I'd been texting for a week, who thought it was hilarious to ask if I was sketchy or had a criminal past, was now face to face with me in the most suspicious-looking situation imaginable. I tried to explain as they loaded me into the ambulance, but honestly, there wasn't much I could say. The blood, the knife wound, the scattered weed on the ground. It didn't exactly scream, innocent victim. To her credit, she stayed professional the whole ride, but I could feel the awkward tension radiating off of her. We recognized each other immediately, but she didn't acknowledge it beyond a tight-lipped, barely there nod. The ride felt like an eternity. She patched me up as best she could, her movements precise and practiced, but I could feel the judgment. Or maybe I was projecting. Either way, the humiliation was unbearable. I made it to the hospital, got a few stitches, and was sent on my way. By the time I got home, the adrenaline had worn off, replaced by a sickening realization. I was probably never going to hear from her again. Not after that. I sent her a text anyway, something short and light. Well, that was the most awkward first meeting in history. Sorry you had to deal with that. She didn't respond. Not that night, not the next day, not ever. She unmatched me on Tinder, too. It wasn't hard to figure out why. To her, I probably looked like exactly the kind of guy she was trying to avoid, a walking, bleeding embodiment of her worst dating instincts. Now I can laugh about it. At the time, though, it was brutal. I'd gone from riding the high of matching with someone genuinely cool to crashing into the absolute worst first impression imaginable. The irony still kills me. Out of all the ambulances in the city, it had to be hers. Out of all the things I could have been doing, I had to be sitting there looking like the poster boy for bad life choices. I can't blame her for ghosting me. I mean, what would you do if you rolled up to a scene and saw a guy you were planning to date sitting on the sidewalk, bleeding from a knife wound, with weed scattered around him? Exactly. Now, whenever I tell this story, it always gets a laugh. It's ridiculous, right? The kind of thing that sounds too absurd to be real. But it happened, and I've got the scar to prove it. If nothing else, it taught me to keep my gold chain at home, and maybe rethink carrying weed in my pocket when I'm out for a walk. And hey, at least I never have to answer the question, what's your worst first impression story, again. This one's got it locked down. Picture this. I'm sprawled on my couch, half-heartedly scrolling through Tinder, while some Netflix show I've seen twice drones on in the background. Swipe left, swipe left, swipe left, nothing worth stopping for. I'm about to give up when I see her. She has one of those perfectly imperfect smiles, like she knows a secret joke, but might share it if you're lucky. Her bio reads, professional pizza enthusiast. Certified blanket fort builder. It's quirky but not trying too hard. Something about her feels different. Different sounded good that night. Different sounded like exactly what I needed. Now, I'm not the type to throw out some generic hey as an opener. I spend a solid 5 minutes crafting the perfect message. It had to be clever but not too much, playful without coming off as desperate. Finally, I settle on. Do you believe in love at first swipe, or should I message you again? I hit send and immediately start overthinking it. But to my surprise, she replies, and not with some half-hearted response. She matches my energy, joke for joke, and suddenly we're talking about everything. Our mutual hatred of celery, our love of trashy reality TV, even the obscure bands we both pretended to know way too much about. I couldn't believe how easy it was to talk to her. This never happens, right? Except it was happening. That's when my inner sleuth kicked in. See, I've watched enough catfish to know better than to take someone at face value online. So like any responsible millennial, I did a little digging. It wasn't creepy. I'm not talking about hiring a private investigator or anything. But I Googled her name and tried to find her on social media. That's when I hit my first roadblock. She didn't have a Facebook. At all. I mean, who doesn't have Facebook? I casually brought it up during one of our chats, and she just laughed. Oh, I never use it, she said. Fair enough, I thought. Some people are off the grid. But something about it didn't sit right. I asked for her last name, just to see if it would lead anywhere. And that's when suddenly she did have a Facebook. The profile was sketchy as hell. No posts older than a week, only 5 photos total, and all of them looked like stock images of a girl living her best life. Her name sounded straight out of a spy movie. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was a scam. But then she sent me this goofy meme about pizza toppings, and my brain went, she can't be that bad, right? I convinced myself to let it go. She was probably just weird, and weird wasn't necessarily bad. So when she suggested meeting up, I agreed. She picked a bar halfway between where she said she lived and where I lived. It seemed like a reasonable choice, public, busy, and neutral ground. But as I was driving there, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that I was walking into a setup. My overactive imagination painted a vivid picture. I'd walk in, and instead of meeting her, I'd get jumped by some sketchy group of Russian dudes she was working with. Just to be safe, I stopped at an ATM on the way and deposited all my cash. It felt a little paranoid, but I wasn't about to take chances. When I got to the bar, there she was. She looked just like her profile pictures, and for a second, all my doubts melted away. She smiled, waved, and even gave me a quick hug. Everything seemed fine, until she said, "This place is a little crowded. Let's go somewhere else." It felt like a trap. Who changes locations on a first date? But she was already heading for the door, and I didn't want to seem rude. As we walked to the next bar, I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting a gang of thugs to jump out of the shadows. Nothing happened. We made it to the second bar, got a couple of drinks, and sat down to talk. At first, I was still on edge. Every part of me screamed, be suspicious. But as the conversation flowed, I started to relax. She was funny, sharp, and just the right amount of weird. We talked for hours, about everything from travel plans to our favorite childhood cartoons. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd misjudged her. And then she brought up pizza. There's this amazing pizza place across the street, she said. Her eyes lit up as she described it, and I couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm. By then I was a little tipsy, so when she suggested going, I agreed. But as we were leaving the bar, she suddenly stopped and said, "Actually, let's go somewhere else. There's an even better pizza place, like 15 blocks away." 15 blocks. It was freezing outside, and I wasn't exactly dressed for a hike. But she had this infectious energy, like this pizza place was going to change my life. Against my better judgment, I followed her. By the time we got there, I couldn't feel my fingers or toes, and I was starting to wonder if she was messing with me. The pizza? It was fine. Not life-changing. Not even great. Just pizza. I didn't say anything, though, because she seemed genuinely happy about it. After we ate, she suggested hitting one more bar. I should have said no. I should have gone home. But for some reason, I said yes. At the third bar, the conversation took a deeper turn. She told me she'd just gotten out of a 4-year relationship, like days before we matched on Tinder. I could tell it was still fresh for her, and while part of me wanted to run, another part wanted to stay. She was messy, sure, but there was something about her I couldn't walk away from. At one point, she leaned in and kissed me. My brain immediately started panicking. This was way too fast, wasn't it? I barely knew her, and the night had been a roller coaster of suspicion and surprise. But something about the way she smiled at me afterward made me think, maybe this is worth it. When the night ended, I was sure I'd never hear from her again. It felt too weird, too chaotic. But the next morning, she texted me, "Last night was fun. Let's do it again sometime." That was a year ago. She wasn't a spy or a scammer, just a delightfully weird person who didn't care about following anyone's rules but her own. Since then, we've been inseparable. Every now and then, I bring up all the red flags I had to ignore to keep dating her, and she just laughs. "You didn't have to follow me to that second pizza place," she teases. But honestly, I'd follow her anywhere, even if it's 15 blocks in the freezing cold for mediocre pizza. I met Paul on a Thursday evening after work. He had one of those charming, slightly crooked smiles in every photo and a profile that read, "Tech consultant by day, amateur ukulele player by night. Looking for someone who laughs from the belly." He seemed warm, clever in a humble way. His messages were thoughtful, never pushy. He asked good questions, stayed away from cliches, and didn't try to force anything. We messaged for about a week before he asked if I'd like to grab a drink. "Nothing fancy," he said. "Just a corner bar, decent music, and a chance to talk without autocorrect getting in the way." So I said yes. We agreed to meet at a place called the Green Lantern, a casual bar tucked between an art gallery and a coffee shop. I'd been there once before with co-workers. It had dim lighting, cheap beer, and a surprisingly good playlist. I arrived 5 minutes early. Paul was already there, seated at the bar with 2 drinks in front of him. "Hey," he said, standing up to greet me. I wasn't sure what you liked, so I took a wild guess. "Whiskey ginger?" I smiled. "Lucky guess." We sat down. The conversation was easy enough. He talked a little about his job, something to do with cloud security, and I talked about mine, which involved more spreadsheets than I cared to admit. He was good at listening. Not just nodding, but really listening. He complimented my laugh. I remember that because it was the last part of the night that felt normal. About 20 minutes in, I excused myself to the restroom. When I came back, he was scrolling through his phone, our drinks untouched. I took a sip of mine, and he smiled. "Still good?" I nodded. "Yeah, thanks again." But something felt off. The taste of the drink hadn't changed, but I suddenly felt lightheaded. Not dizzy exactly, just detached. Like the air had thickened around me, and I was moving through it slower than everyone else. My fingers tingled. My mouth felt dry. I tried to focus on what Paul was saying, but his words started to blur together. My heart began to race, not like anxiety, but like my body was sending out a flare. I blinked hard. That's when I saw her. A woman, 3 tables down, was staring at me. Not casually, not with curiosity. She was watching me intently. Eye contact unwavering. And then she shook her head. Once. Firmly. I blinked again. Was I imagining that? Paul turned to grab a napkin, and the woman mouthed something to me silently. Don't drink it. I froze. The edges of the room were starting to blur. My limbs felt heavy, like someone had draped wet towels over them. My instincts screamed through the fog. I stood up suddenly. My chair scraped loudly against the floor, and Paul looked startled. Everything okay? He asked. I need the restroom, I mumbled, already moving. Once inside the bathroom, I locked the door and leaned against the sink. My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone. I texted the only person I knew was nearby. Emma. She was my best friend, and she'd been the first one I told about this date. I hadn't even told her the guy's name, just that I was going out, and where. Me, something's wrong. I think he drugged me. Me, at Green Lantern. In the bathroom. Me, please come. I stared at the screen, praying I had typed it right. My vision was starting to dull at the edges. Seconds later, my phone buzzed. Emma, I'm here. I'm the one who warned you. I stared at the message. What? Emma, I saw him. I recognized him from before. I had a bad feeling. I followed you in. Stay put. I felt my knees buckle and sank to the floor. Emma was here? How? I didn't even tell her his name. A minute later, there was a knock. It's me, came Emma's voice, muffled but unmistakably hers. Open the door. I unlocked it, and she slipped inside, locking it behind her. She crouched beside me. You're okay, she whispered. I've got you. I couldn't stop shaking. She handed me a bottle of water and helped me sip. He's still out there. I don't think he knows I'm here with you. I told the bartender you needed help. He's calling an ambulance. I tried to speak, but my mouth felt thick. Emma held my hand. I saw him last month, she said quietly. Same bar. He was with another girl. She looked off. I didn't know what to do. But when I saw him again tonight with you. She didn't finish the sentence. The paramedics came. I don't remember much after that. They took a sample. Confirmed later that there were traces of benzodiazepines, something fast-acting. Something slipped into my drink while I was in the bathroom. The police took a report. Paul was gone by the time they arrived. But the bartender remembered him. Security footage caught his face. They matched it to a name. He hadn't used Paul on the app. His real name was something else, Jaron, with a record in another city. 2 dropped charges. Allegations that never made it to court. I gave a statement. So did Emma. I never saw him again. It's been months since that night. I still think about it. I still feel my body go cold when I pass that bar. I still check every drink I'm handed, at restaurants, at parties, even at my own apartment. I've replayed the night over and over. The moment I sipped the drink. The way Emma looked at me. The realization that my body was shutting down before I even understood what was happening. And I think about what would have happened if Emma hadn't been there. If she hadn't followed her gut. If she hadn't recognized his face. Would I have woken up somewhere I didn't recognize? Would I have woken up at all? I can't say. But I know this. Evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it compliments your laugh. Sometimes it offers you a whiskey ginger and seems like the safest person in the room. And sometimes, survival looks like a quiet woman at the next table mouthing the words that save your life. I never reported it online. I didn't post his face. I didn't want the attention. But I tell people now, not to scare them, but because we need to look out for each other. Because the moment you feel something's off, it probably is. And because sometimes someone else sees what you don't. I still go on dates. But I meet in public. I order my own drinks. I keep my eyes open. I met Semric through Tinder. His profile didn't stand out much. 3 photos, all selfies, and a bio that said, looking for something really real. No games. Just honesty. Normally, that last bit would have been enough for me to swipe left. Guys who write no games are often the ones who play the most. But I was in a generous mood. We matched, and he messaged me first. Hi, I love your smile. It feels safe. A little odd, but not terrible. We started chatting. He asked about my job, my favorite films, whether I preferred dogs or cats. Vanilla stuff. He was polite. Not particularly witty or insightful, but kind enough. I wasn't swooning, but I wasn't repulsed either. He suggested grabbing a drink sometime soon, and I said yes. I figured, why not? A casual drink wouldn't kill me. We met on a Thursday night at a quiet little bar tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop. He showed up right on time, wearing a navy sweater and scuffed brown boots. He was shorter than I expected, and his voice was gentler than it had sounded in our messages, almost childlike. He smiled a lot, too much. He hugged me the moment we met. Not a quick, polite hug, a long, lingering one that made me subtly pull back. "Wow," he said, holding onto my shoulders. "You're even prettier in person." I smiled, murmured a thank you, and signaled toward the bar. We sat and ordered drinks, gin and tonic for me, something herbal for him. I asked about his week. He told me his co-workers were energy vampires, but that he tried to stay positive by listening to meditation tracks during lunch. I nodded politely. He asked about my hobbies, and I mentioned painting and yoga. He said, "I love that. You seem very grounded." The conversation was fine. Not electric, but not a disaster. I knew within 20 minutes that there wasn't a spark, but I also knew I'd stay for one drink, be polite, and bow out gracefully. Except Semric had other plans. About halfway through the drink, he reached across the table and touched my hand. "I'm really glad I met you," he said softly. "I had a feeling about tonight." I smiled awkwardly and gently pulled my hand away. "It's nice to meet you too." When I finished my drink, I checked the time and said I needed to head out. Early meeting the next day. "No problem," he said. "I'll walk you to your car." I tried to decline, but he insisted. I didn't want to make a scene, so I let him. The walk was short, and I made sure to keep a bit of space between us. When we reached my car, he stepped closer and said, "Would it be too soon to say I feel something here?" I blinked. I think it's a little early to tell, but it was nice meeting you." He nodded, eyes wide. Yeah, totally. I get it. I don't meet people like you often. You have a calm energy. It's rare." I gave a small smile, opened my car door, and said, "Take care, Semric." He texted me before I even pulled out of the parking lot. "Thank you for tonight. I feel lighter now." Then again, 5 minutes later. "I'm still smiling. That has to mean something, right?" I didn't respond right away. I usually wait until the next day to send a polite, "thanks again" message if I'm not feeling the connection. But Semric didn't wait. By the time I got home, maybe 30 minutes later, I had 5 more texts. All variations of "I really like you." "I feel like I can breathe around you." And one that said, "I think our souls recognize each other. Did you feel it too?" That one made me pause. I typed out a response carefully. "Hey, thank you for tonight. You're very kind, but I didn't feel a romantic connection. I wish you the best though." I hit send. No reply. An hour passed. Then 2. At midnight, I got his response. "Wow. Okay. I thought you were different. I opened up to you. I don't usually do that. Then, I guess I was wrong. Again. Then, you know what? Forget it. I hope your early meeting goes well." I didn't reply. The next morning, I woke up to a wall of texts, some apologizing, some accusing. "I'm sorry. I was just hurt. You led me on. You're like all the others. I'll never understand why women pretend to be nice. We had a moment. I know we did." I blocked his number. I told myself it was over. It wasn't. The following Monday, I walked into work and noticed 2 of my co-workers whispering near the espresso machine. They stopped when I walked by. I brushed it off. But during lunch, my friend Nira slid into the seat across from me and said, "Did you go out with someone named Semric?" I froze. "Why?" She looked uncomfortable. "He messaged me on Facebook. Said he was your new boyfriend and that you ghosted him after sleeping together." My stomach dropped. "What?" She showed me the message. It was long, rambling, full of half-truths and lies. He claimed I'd used him, that I was emotionally manipulative, and that he was reaching out to people in her life so they can see the real her. He'd messaged 3 of my co-workers. He even found my cousin on Instagram. I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. I didn't even kiss this man. I tried to stay calm, but inside I was spiraling. I spent the afternoon on edge, waiting for another shoe to drop. That evening I checked my LinkedIn. He'd viewed my profile. Then my Facebook. He'd commented on an old post from months ago with a vague quote. "Some people are great actors." I reported and blocked him everywhere I could think of. Then came the DMs from people I didn't know. "Hey, is it true you slept with that guy and ghosted him? He's saying some wild stuff about you. Just thought you should know." I was humiliated. I felt exposed. I started showing up to work early and leaving late, just to avoid running into anyone. I deleted social media apps from my phone. I couldn't focus, couldn't sleep. It had been one drink, one polite evening, one firm but respectful boundary, and this was the fallout. I considered contacting a lawyer, but nothing he'd said was technically illegal. Just cruel, vindictive, designed to chip away at my peace. After a week, the messages stopped, but the damage lingered. I'd bump into someone at work, and I could feel them wondering. I heard whispers. I felt the judgment, even if it wasn't spoken. I couldn't prove anything, but I knew. I knew what he'd planted, and I hated that I had no way to undo it. I started questioning everything. Was I too nice? Should I have left the date earlier? Should I have been colder? Sharper? Less polite? But no, that wasn't the answer. The problem wasn't me. It was him. Semric wasn't heartbroken. He was entitled. He believed kindness was a contract, that a woman's time was a promise. That rejection was betrayal. I was just the latest target of his narrative. Eventually things calmed down. People moved on. Work returned to normal. But I didn't forget, and I haven't been on Tinder since then. I matched with a guy named Jaspin on a Wednesday afternoon during my lunch break. His photos were clean and minimal. One of him standing beside a bicycle on a foggy trail, another of him in a crisp white shirt holding a plant, and the last one was just a close-up of his eye with a reflection of the sky in it. It was a little artsy, a little pretentious, but not in a way that made me roll my eyes. His bio read, "Part-time herbalist, full-time question asker. I believe in rituals, clean eating, and honesty." I hesitated for a second. Something about the phrase part-time herbalist made me think of someone who might try to sell me on essential oils to fix my anxiety. But he was cute, and I was curious, so I swiped right. He matched with me instantly. His first message was, "What's one thing you know you'll never grow tired of?" I appreciated that it wasn't a generic "hey" or "how's your day?" I responded, "Rain." I could listen to it for hours, especially at night. He wrote back, "Same. It's nature's lullaby. Do you listen to it with your window open or closed?" And just like that, we were off. Jaspin was a good conversationalist. He had a poetic way of phrasing things that made even simple topics sound a little more enchanting. He told me he worked at a holistic wellness center part-time, helped manage a local apothecary, and was studying for a certification in nutritional science. He had a calmness to him, like someone who had done a lot of yoga and was very aware of his breath at all times. He talked about balance, energy, the healing power of certain teas. I wasn't sure how much of it I bought into, but I liked how grounded he seemed. We talked for a few days before planning our first date, a walk through the botanical gardens followed by tea at a cafe he recommended. I'd never been to that part of the city before, and I liked the idea of doing something other than sitting across from someone in a dimly lit restaurant, trying to make awkward small talk over overpriced appetizers. He showed up exactly on time, wearing a moss green jacket, a scarf, and a look of serene attentiveness. His voice in person was softer than I expected, almost like a whisper, but his presence was solid. He moved slowly, deliberately, like time bent slightly around him. The date was actually really enjoyable. We walked through the gardens, and he pointed out plants by name, explaining their properties. He told me about mugwort, valerian root, and why he believed basil could help with memory. I listened, intrigued even when I didn't fully understand. When we sat down for tea, he ordered a custom blend, something with hibiscus, cinnamon bark, and rose petals. I ordered a chai. He asked thoughtful questions and listened carefully, nodding and holding eye contact in a way that was intense but not uncomfortable. We ended the date with a hug, and he asked if we could meet again soon. I said yes. Date 2 happened 3 days later. This time, he invited me over to his apartment for dinner. He said he wanted to cook for me, a plant-based meal with intentional ingredients. I was a little hesitant. I don't usually go to someone's home that early in the dating process, but he had given me no red flags so far. He seemed respectful, earnest, and very non-threatening. Plus, I was curious to see what kind of space a person like Jaspin lived in. His apartment was exactly what I expected, and yet somehow weirder. The air smelled like sage and citrus. There were crystals on nearly every surface, clusters of amethyst, smoky quartz, and one massive chunk of rose-colored stone near the entrance. Plants hung from the ceiling, climbed up bookshelves, and spilled from windowsills. The lighting was soft and golden, and there was ambient instrumental music playing softly in the background. "Take off your shoes," he said gently. "Let the floor greet you." Okay, I thought. A little odd, but fine. Dinner was surprisingly good. A mushroom stew with lentils, spiced rice, and a salad with some kind of nut-based dressing. He served everything in mismatched bowls, and we ate on floor cushions at a low wooden table. We talked about childhood dreams, what we thought about when we couldn't sleep, and whether we believed the moon actually affected our moods. I felt comfortable. Not giddy, not butterflies in my stomach excited, just peacefully curious. After dinner, he asked if I wanted to see his personal project. I raised an eyebrow. What kind of project? He smiled. Something I work on every day. It's a bit unconventional, but it's part of how I track my health. He led me to a small room at the back of the apartment. It looked like a study, part library, part apothecary. Shelves lined with dried herbs, notebooks, and glass jars. He pulled open a drawer in a wooden cabinet and revealed a black leather-bound binder. Inside were neatly arranged plastic sleeves, like the kind used to hold trading cards. Each sleeve contained a small, labeled vial. Each vial was filled with liquid. "This," he said with quiet pride, "is my urine journal." I blinked. "Your what?" "My urine journal," he repeated. "I collect a vial every morning and note its color, consistency, and scent. It's one of the best ways to monitor internal shifts, hydration, nutrient absorption, kidney function. You'd be amazed what your body tells you when you learn to listen." He flipped through several pages, showing me vials of varying shades, pale yellow, amber, one that looked alarmingly dark. "I've been doing this for 2 years," he said. "Every day, without fail." I didn't know what to say. My brain was trying to catch up with my eyes. "That's really dedicated," I managed. "It's data," he said earnestly. "Real, personal health data. So many people ignore the signs their body gives them. But I listen." He looked at me then, like he expected admiration. Or maybe awe. I nodded slowly, trying to keep my face neutral. "That's really something." He smiled and carefully closed the binder, placing it back in the drawer. "I don't show that to everyone," he said. "But you seemed open." I gave a half smile. "Thanks for trusting me with it." We sat in silence for a moment, and I realized I was gripping my knees a little too tightly. Eventually, I stood up and said I should probably get going. He walked me to the door, gave me a long, quiet hug, and said he'd love to see me again. I nodded, smiled, and left. Back in my car, I sat for a while, staring at the steering wheel. I wasn't scared. I didn't think he was dangerous. But I felt unsettled. Not just because of the urine journal, though that was definitely a part of it, but because of how normal he made it seem. How comfortable he was sharing something so intensely personal, bordering on medical, as if it were a photo album. I tried to rationalize it. People have weird hobbies. Some people collect taxidermy. Others hoard vintage dolls. Maybe this was just his thing. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it wasn't just the act, it was the context. He'd shared it not as an odd quirk or as something funny, but as a core part of his identity. He was proud of it. It was something he expected me to admire. And I couldn't. I didn't text him that night. Or the next. He messaged me a few times, gentle check-ins, polite thinking of you notes. I responded briefly, then faded out. I didn't owe him a confrontation. I didn't want to shame him. But I also knew I couldn't date someone who collected bodily fluids like they were rare coins. I met Priya Dravana on Tinder. Her profile was refreshingly simple. Just 3 photos, none of them filtered or taken at strange angles, and a short bio that read, "Food lover." Sarcastic. Probably watching reruns of old cooking shows. I liked that. It had personality without trying too hard. She looked like someone I'd actually get along with, a wide, easy smile in her first photo, holding a bowl of noodles and laughing in the second, and in the third, standing in front of a street mural with her arms crossed like she owned the world. I swiped right. She matched with me that evening. The first few messages were great. She was witty without being snarky, and she had this way of responding that made it feel like we were already in a conversation that had started long before we'd ever met. She replied fast, but not in a clingy way, just enough to keep things moving. We talked about food a lot. Turns out Priya was a bit of a culinary nerd. She could talk for hours about spice levels, fermentation, and why she thought store-bought hummus was a crime against humanity. I joked that I could barely cook pasta without supervision, and she told me she'd teach me, but only if I promised not to put ketchup on it. The first date was easy. Coffee and pastries at a small cafe tucked behind a bookstore. She showed up in a mustard yellow coat, hair piled up in a messy bun, and boots that looked like they'd seen actual hikes. We clicked. Conversation flowed, and I remember thinking, wow, this could actually go somewhere. Over the next few days, we messaged constantly. She sent me pictures of dishes she was cooking, spicy curries, elaborate stews, and one time, a failed attempt at macarons that still looked better than anything I could bake. By the time the second date rolled around, I was excited. Not just nervous, butterflies in your stomach excited, but real, I want to know more about this person excited. That's when she dropped the idea. So my parents are in town this weekend, she said over text. They're doing this low-key dinner thing at my place. Would you want to come by? I blinked at the screen. Parents. Second date. I hesitated. It felt soon. But then again, maybe her family was just casual like that. Maybe this wasn't a big deal. She'd used the words low-key and casual, and I convinced myself it wasn't a formal thing. Sure, I replied after a moment. That sounds nice. She sent back a smiley face and a message. They're excited to meet you. That should have been my first clue that this wasn't going to be low-key at all. The evening of the dinner, I showed up at her apartment clutching a bottle of wine and a box of gourmet chocolates I'd picked up from a local shop. I wasn't sure if either were appropriate, but they felt safe. Her building was modest but charming. Worn brick, a creaky elevator, and a hallway that smelled faintly of spices and old wood. I rang the bell, and she opened the door almost immediately. She looked stunning. Not like, I'm meeting someone for dinner stunning, more like, I'm going to a fancy film premiere stunning. Her hair was down, styled in soft waves, and she wore a deep green dress that matched her eyes. I suddenly felt underdressed in my button-down and jeans. Hey, she said, smiling. Hey, I replied, holding up the wine and chocolates like a peace offering. I brought these. Hope that's okay. She took them with a laugh. Perfect. My mom loves dark chocolate. Come in. The apartment was warm, cozy, and filled with the smell of cumin, garlic, and something sweet I couldn't place. Candles flickered on the dining table, which was already set with matching plates, gold-rimmed glasses, and napkins folded into little fans. This didn't feel casual. Let me introduce you, she said, guiding me into the dining room. Her parents were already seated. Her father, Mr. Dravana, was a tall man with sharp cheekbones, neatly combed silver hair, and eyes that missed nothing. He didn't smile when I entered, just gave me a nod that felt more like a test than a greeting. Her mother, on the other hand, was petite and elegant, with a gaze that could slice through steel. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Mom, Dad, this is Isael, Priya said with a soft smile. The guy I've been telling you about. Ah, her father said. So you're the pasta guy. I chuckled nervously. Guilty. He didn't laugh. I sat down across from them, and almost immediately the questions began. At first, they were standard. Where did I grow up? What do I do for a living? What kind of food do I like? But then they shifted. What are your long-term career goals? Her father asked, leaning forward. Well, I said, trying to sound confident. I work in content strategy for a digital agency, and I'm hoping to move into a senior management role in the next couple of years. He nodded slowly. And your salary? Is it competitive? I blinked. Yeah, it's comfortable. He raised an eyebrow. Comfortable is subjective. Can you be more specific? I glanced at Priya, hoping for a rescue. She just smiled politely and sipped her drink. I make enough to support myself well, I said carefully. Her mother jumped in. And your family? Are they local? What do your parents do? I answered as honestly as I could. My dad was retired military, my mom a schoolteacher. Good people. Humble roots. Her mother nodded, but I could feel her assessing me, calculating. The questions didn't stop. Have you ever been in a serious relationship? How long did it last? Why did it end? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? 10. By the time the food was served, an elaborate spread of biryani, paneer, naan, chutneys, I was emotionally exhausted. I tried to compliment the meal, hoping to lighten the mood. This is incredible, I said. You're amazing, Priya. She didn't cook it, her mother said. I did. I swallowed. Well, it's delicious. Thank you. As we ate, her father launched into a monologue about responsibility, ambition, and how a man must build a foundation before he invites someone else to stand on it. It wasn't subtle. At one point, he turned to me and said, "Are you prepared to prove yourself worthy of our daughter?" I blinked. I don't think relationships should start with proving worth. I think they grow from understanding and respect. He narrowed his eyes. That's a convenient answer. The rest of the meal was a blur. Her mother asked if I went to therapy. Her father asked if I believed in marriage. They both asked whether I was serious about Priya on the second date. And the entire time, Priya just sat there, smiling, nodding occasionally, not once stepping in. That was what unsettled me the most. I get it, parents can be protective. But this felt like a tribunal, not a dinner. And she didn't offer me a lifeline. Not even a change of subject. After dessert, which I barely tasted, her mother finally smiled and said, "We're just making sure you're serious. Our daughter is not someone who settles." I nodded politely, thanked them for the meal, and stood up to leave. Priya walked me to the door. "You okay?" she asked. I hesitated. That was intense. She smiled. "Yeah, they can be a lot, but they mean well." I wanted to ask why she hadn't said anything, why she let them interrogate me like I was applying for a loan. But I didn't. Instead, I just said, "Thanks for the dinner. Tell them thank you, too." She nodded. I left. It started with a voice, not hers, but mine. I'd matched with a woman named Cerelia one late Friday night after a long work week and 2 glasses of wine. Her profile was a mix of contradictions. Photos of her dressed in earth-tone linen standing in a forest, followed by a picture of her in a glittering cocktail dress on a rooftop bar. Her bio read, "Poet, linguist, collector of voices. I believe the throat holds more truth than the eyes." I had no idea what that meant, but I was intrigued. I swiped right. We matched instantly. Her first message came 5 minutes later. "Do you like the sound of your own voice?" It caught me off guard. I reread it 3 times. I had expected a hello, a compliment, maybe a joke. But this? It felt like a test. I replied, "I'm not sure. I've never really thought about it." She sent back, "You should. It's the first instrument you ever learned. Most people forget that." Okay, so she was definitely different. Our conversation unfolded with a rhythm I wasn't used to. She didn't ask what I did for work or where I lived. Instead, she asked about the last time I screamed, whether I sang in the shower, if I'd ever tried to hum underwater. She told me she'd once gone an entire week without speaking, just to see how it would alter her perception of sound. I found her fascinating, though a little intense. We exchanged voice notes instead of texts for most of that weekend. Hers was soft, measured, and deliberate. She spoke like someone reading a bedtime story to a room of strangers, calm but mysterious. I didn't love the sound of my own voice, but she did. "You speak like someone who's always listening for an answer," she said once. "It's beautiful." By Sunday, she asked if I wanted to meet in person. I agreed, though I wasn't sure what I was walking into. She chose the location, a sound bath session hosted in a converted greenhouse on the edge of the city. I'd never been to a sound bath before and had to Google it. I figured it would be awkward but interesting. At the very least, I'd have a story to tell. When I arrived, she was waiting outside, dressed in a flowing pewter-colored wrap and barefoot. Her hair was braided down her back in a single long plait, and she wore no makeup, but her skin glowed with the kind of confidence that didn't need accessories. "Hello," she said, smiling. "Hi," I replied, feeling suddenly overdressed in jeans and a button-down. She took my hand without asking and led me inside. The space was warm and dim, with soft lights scattered among plants and cushions. A woman played a singing bowl in the corner, and somewhere in the back, a wind chime echoed faintly. We lay side by side on yoga mats while the facilitator guided us through sound meditation, bowls, gongs, gentle hums. I didn't know what I was supposed to feel, but I tried to stay open. Afterward, she looked over at me and whispered, "You breathe like someone with a lot of withheld syllables." I didn't know how to respond, so I just nodded. We went for tea afterward, and I expected her to ask what I thought about the session, but she didn't. Instead, she asked if I wanted to see her apartment. I paused. It was early in the evening, and I wasn't sure where she wanted things to go. But she didn't seem like someone looking for a hookup. She felt curated, like a performance you didn't interrupt with assumptions. "Sure," I said. Her apartment was in a narrow building above a reflexologist studio. The hallway leading to her door was lined with mirrors, and even before she opened the door, I could hear soft chanting coming from inside. She let me in and closed the door behind us. Her apartment was dimly lit, filled with tapestries, candles, and shelves stacked with antique radios, recorders, microphones, and dozens of cassettes labeled in small, neat handwriting. "What is all this?" I asked, stepping carefully around the coiled cords and wooden boxes. "My archive," she said. "I collect voices." I turned toward her. "Voices?" She nodded. "I record people. Not just interviews. I ask them things they don't usually say out loud. Fears. Secrets. Words they've never spoken before. Then I archive them. I listen to them when I write. She gestured toward a small writing desk covered in notebooks and cassette decks. It helps me understand the human throat, she said. So much language gets lost in the body. I tried to process that. She walked over to a shelf and pulled out a tape labeled as September 2022. She slid it into a player, pressed play. A man's voice filled the room. Shaky quiet. I never told anyone. I used to pray to be invisible. Not metaphorically. I really wanted to vanish. She let it play for a minute, then stopped it. That was a bus driver I met at a retreat, she said. He let me record him after we shared a meal in silence. I wasn't sure what to say. She looked at me then and asked, "May I record you?" I laughed. "Right now?" She nodded. "Just your voice. Nothing visual. Just a few questions. You don't have to answer anything that makes you uncomfortable." I hesitated. It felt strange. Intimate. But also, I was curious. I'd never been asked to do something like that before. "Okay," I said. She led me to a floor cushion near her desk, lit a candle between us, and took out a small vintage microphone. She pressed record. "What is a sound you miss?" she asked. I thought for a moment. "My grandmother's laugh," I said. It was high-pitched and kind of unfiltered. She used to laugh with her whole face. She nodded. "What's something you've never said out loud before?" I blinked. "That's a big one." "You can pause," she said. "Or skip." I thought hard. Finally, I said, "I'm afraid of becoming ordinary." She didn't react. Just nodded again. She asked 4 more questions. I answered them all. My voice felt strange in the stillness, exposed but held. When she stopped the tape, she smiled. "Thank you." I felt oddly lighter. We didn't kiss. We didn't even hug. I left that night feeling like I'd participated in a ritual I hadn't fully understood. Over the next week, she sent me voice recordings instead of texts. Snippets of poetry. Descriptions of her dreams. Once, a 5-minute track of her whispering names of sea animals in different languages. I wasn't sure what we were building. It didn't feel like dating. It felt like I was slowly being inducted into someone's personal mythology. Date 2 was less of a date and more of a session. She invited me back to her place to explore resonance, whatever that meant. When I arrived, she was wrapping her neck in a long scarf made of copper thread. "I want to try something," she said. "I've been studying how sound moves through the larynx. I want to map yours." Before I could ask what that involved, she handed me a glass of water with flower petals floating in it and told me to hum while sipping. Then she placed her fingers lightly on my throat as I did. Her touch was gentle but clinical. "You hold tension here," she murmured. It wasn't sensual. It wasn't romantic. It was anatomical. I began to feel like a specimen. She asked if I'd be willing to undergo a vocal cleanse. A day of silence followed by guided toning exercises. I declined, making up an excuse about work. She seemed disappointed. That night, she played me another tape, this one labeled R, unnamed. It was a woman's voice, sobbing quietly. "I never wanted to be a mother," the voice whispered. "But I did it anyway, and I still feel hollow." I asked her if she got consent for all her recordings. "Always," she said. "I'm not a voyeur. I'm a collector. There's a difference." But I wasn't so sure anymore. As I left that evening, she kissed my cheek and said, "Your voice has layers. I want to hear them all." I didn't return her messages after that. She kept sending voice notes. Some were just ambient sounds, others were whispers of my name. Once she sent me a recording of herself reciting a poem I didn't understand, followed by the sound of her breathing steadily for a full minute. Eventually I blocked her.